This is the final technique we're going to look at and discuss before moving to on the group processing, but it works as a nice bridge because with this particular technique, we have one signal directly relating to and triggering the other signal's processing. So that's just a more confusing way of talking about side chaining. Okay, and many of you are familiar with side chaining and probably more specifically side chain compression because of a few really popular songs from maybe 8 or 9 years ago, at least when this video was recorded. And in that example, they would have the kick drum basically trigger every other sound to be sidechain compressed so that every time the kick hit, you'd really hear it pop through and everything else would get quiet. Then it would come up to level. Then the kick would hit again. It would get quiet and so forth throughout the entire song. Now, this is a very effective strategy if your music is going to be played back in a club and you don't want to lose the kick drum and you want it to be the pounding presence that keeps hitting over and over again. But if you're just listening to that music for pleasure, it can honestly be somewhat distracting, at least to a large majority of listeners. And that's why a lot of people cringe when the whole concept of sidechain compression gets brought up. That being said, since that time, the development with these compressors has gotten a lot better where it can be used much more transparently. And we can even now start to use it for very functional and practical reasons to a point where the listener's not even hearing or knowing that it's going on. Okay, so that's what we're going to do in this video. And then the second example here, we will have the more extreme version just so you can see and hear how that's all set up. All right, so let's jump into it. And the processor we're going to use that gives us a sidechain input is the TDR Nova. Okay, and so you're going to have to consult your own DAW on how this works. But basically in this one, if I want to enable the side chaining, I have to go over to this fourth little icon here and then choose what signal I want to be the trigger for the side chain compression. Okay, so I want this metal trolley to be compressed when the poem is being read. So I put the Nova onto the trolley track, I go into the input, I choose the poem. Okay, and now we're pretty much good to go, except I have to go into the plugin, and instead of internal sidechain, which is how we've been working with this as a dynamic EQ, it's reacting to itself, we'll now have it react externally to the poem here. All right, so let's first set this up by just turning everything off and just focusing on the compression itself. So when this plays back here, and we try to set up the compression, nothing is happening because we need the poem to be triggering it. So that's the really crucial part to all of this. And the reason we're putting this on is because we want to hear the poem. We want that to come through here. So let's bring it up a little bit closer.
Farewell.
Now we're seeing something.
Whenever you welcome the hour that awakens the night song of mirth in your bower, then think of the friend who once welcomed it too, and forgot his own griefs to be happy with you. Farewell. But whenever you welcome the hour that awakens the night song of mirth in your bower, then think of the friend who once welcomed it too, and forgot his own griefs to be happy with you. Farewell.
Okay, so the reason why I'm setting this up in such a way is so when I go in and I turn this off, you're going to hear a pretty big difference. So this is with it on.
Farewell. But whenever you welcome the hour that awakens the night song of mirth in your bower, then think of the friend who once welcomed it too, and forgot his own griefs to be happy with you.
And now let's try it with it off.
Night song of mirth in your bower, then think of the friend who once welcomed it too, and forgot his own griefs to be happy with you.
So you can hear, particularly in that moment where it gets really loud, that it's really helpful to have the sidechain compressor acting on this signal so that it pulls it down based on the vocal coming in. And if you want to do an experiment, you can use something like white noise, put the white noise on here, set it up to be sidechain, and then bounce the white noise. And you'll see that there's a similar, only the inverse, like a little puzzle piece that gets cut out in the white noise for where these parts of the vocal or whatever it is that's triggering the sidechain compressor are being acted upon. I went ahead here and I put the attack all the way down so that it responds to, the most transient parts in the speaker's voice in this example, but you can experiment with that and mess around. I also like a slow release because I don't want it to be obvious that I'm doing the side chaining in this example, but we could do that and you'll hear how this works. You'll hear it coming back up rather quickly. And let's actually make this even more extreme just so you can really hear it.
Farewell, but whenever you welcome the
And let's turn it on. That always helps.
that awakens the night song of mirth in your bower, then think of the friend who once welcomed it too, and forgot his own grief. Then think of the friend who once welcomed it too.
So believe it or not, with this processor, it's actually very transparent anyway, but I do like to have a little bit more of a release on this.
Then think of the friend who once welcomed it too, and forgot his own griefs to be happy. Then think of the friend who once welcomed it too, and forgot his own griefs to be happy with you.
Okay, so that's one example of sidechain compression, and you really have to be listening in context to know where and when this is appropriate. So specifically if you have a vocal part and then maybe you have something like, I don't know, a piano playing at the same time, you might go in and use this sidechain compression very subtly, and you can even get very specific with it. So if we think about the dynamic EQ, we can hone in on particular frequency ranges. So if I go and I grab the span, we can look and see where is this mostly
Then think
occupying.
of the friend who once welcomed it too, and forgot his own griefs to be.
Okay, in this general vicinity. So I could then go in here to the TDR Nova, and instead of setting it up like I've set it up here, I'm just going to start a new instance to make this easier for you guys to understand. I can go in here, I can set the sidechain up to be external. I go in here, I set the input to be the farewell poem post, and now we go in and we set a specific band in that region. So I'll just turn off the other bands. I only really need the one. And we'll have a nice wide cue. We'll bring the gain down even broader. That should be in the zone right about there. And now we're going to turn this on and get it working.
That awakens the night song of mirth in your bower. Then think of the friend who once welcomed it too, and forgot his own. That awakens the night song of mirth in your bower. Then think of the friend who once welcomed it too, that awakens the night song of mirth in your bower. Then think of the friend who once welcomed it too. Then think of the friend who once welcomed it too. Then think of the friend who once welcomed it.
So you can hear that we can get really specific on frequency ranges if we just want to make sure that this signal is only now being compressed inside of this particular band. So if there's more energy up top, if there's more energy down low, that's not going to be affected by the sidechain compression. And when you have something that's as transparent as the TDR Nova, it works really well in a broad variety of situations, so well where your listener probably won't even be hearing that gain change happening as compared to something really obvious, which we'll look at in the next example. And so, as promised, we're going to take a look at a couple more applications of the sidechain compression. The first is the classic radio DJ, the volume gets turned down when the DJ starts speaking approach. And then the other is going to be that classic kind of kick drum pounding through like a pad part. So let's start with the radio example. So the first decision you have to make is what sound do you want to be compressed? And in this example, it's pretty obvious that we want this music to be compressed based on the voice. So I'm a radio DJ talking over the music. So let's go ahead and bring in that TDR Nova onto the music part. We'll turn the side chaining to external, and we'll go down and choose the proper source, which in this example is the radio DJ. We can go with post here. All right, so I'm going to have this compress evenly all the way across the frequency spectrum, so I can just turn all of these off, turn the threshold on. I'm a radio DJ talking over the music. I'm a radio DJ pausing, but still talking over the music. I'm a radio DJ talking over the music. I'm a radio DJ pausing, but still talking over the music. All right, so now we can hear this on and off. I'm a radio DJ talking over the music. I'm a radio DJ talking over the music. I'm a radio DJ pausing, but still talking over the music. So unfortunately, this one doesn't really give us a fast enough attack time to maybe bring it down, and it doesn't give us a slow enough release time where it doesn't start popping back through. So in an actual application here, you'd probably have a release time of like 3.5 seconds so that it's a nice slow, gradual fade back up, not this kind of quick like that you're hearing right now. Also, keep in mind that the radio DJ's voice is usually very heavily compressed, and I've used the Loud Max to compress it somewhat, but it would probably be compressed even harder than this, meaning that you're going to have a smoother character being brought into the actual sidechain compression, and that's definitely a part of it. But that's the idea with the effect, and it's pretty much the same thing if you want to have a kick drum really like poking through on, say, a pad part. So this is what it sounds like now. What we want is to have the pad move out of the way, get quiet when the kick drum hits. And that's the whole point here of using, again, this sidechain compression. And if we wanted, we could go in here and specifically pick out certain frequencies, but I think for the sake of example, we'll just have it work all the way across the frequency spectrum. We need to go in here, choose this to be external sidechain, and then pick the source, which is going to be the kick. That's what's going to guide the action here on this TDR Nova. And let's just go in here and set this up. If we really push it hard, it starts to sound more like the classic effect, but you can also be very subtle with it, and that also tends to work well. Because this is such a transparent processor, even when you crank the settings all the way, it still sounds, you know, pretty transparent, which for the records that you've maybe heard this effect on, it's a little bit more pronounced and extreme, and you'd have to use a different sort of compressor that has that character and a really sharp knee. Really hear what's going on there with the pad, and if we choose the kick to be pre here, we can actually then go and mute this kick drum and we'll still be able to hear the effect. Sorry, muted the wrong one. So that's the general idea with that. And again, you can hear that this is actually fairly transparent and would work quite well in a practical application of a sidechain compressor, not so much maybe an effect that you're going for. You'd want to use a more aggressive compressor to maybe do something like that. But this gives you an idea of how you set it up and how it works.